Thank you so much, Anshul. I think I would need to share the screen as well. So can I go ahead and do that as well?
Yes, absolutely. So Team MSMEX will give you the screen sharing access right now. Don't worry about that.
So much. I've just got that, and I'm just going to be sharing. So I'm so happy being here, and I really enjoyed listening to the previous esteemed guest out here, Pankuri, and she was really amazing, saying that she doesn't believe in marketing, and that's so true because marketing is something even I used to be like way having too many different perceived notions about it. And growth is indeed something that comes out so very beautifully. And today, as we are going to be talking about leadership excellence and how do we build a culture of drive, pride and performance, it's again about growth. So typically when I meet in a lot of many entrepreneurs, I get a constant kind of a nagging kind of question, and the question is that we built this up, we started this up, and it's so beautiful and it was so nice at the start, but as we started expanding, we have people from different spaces. We have some who are loyal, some who just come here, work and just move off. We find that the culture is all moving to all different kinds of directions. What do we do about it? Why is the team so different? Why am I not able to align the organizational goals with the team? Why there is so much of disparity between the vision that we have as founders and the team as such? So what's the culture that I need to bring in? I find that the culture is so disturbing out here. It's not the way I am, envisaged, and so forth and so on. So I think this as a very good concern for many of us as we are expanding from our solopreneurship to being an entrepreneur, to building up an enterprise as an empire, to having like 10, 15, 20, 100,000 team members who have the same passion, who have the same vision, who have the same goals, who have those shared goals alongside. So how do we go about doing that? What are some of the ways that we can do? That's all that I'm going to be speaking in today's session. And hopefully I can add some value for everyone looking into this space. So just to give you a brief about what is coming up, I just wanted to quickly share a small little story. And we all know about the Sea of Galilee versus the Dead Sea. Many of you would have heard this story, but just for the rest of you. So this is a water body which has, it comes from the river of Jordan. Both of them, they emerge out, the source of water is from the river of Jordan. It so happens, though the river of Jordan is the source for both these water bodies or these lakes, the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea, as the name says, they both are very different. In Sea of Galilee, you would find a thriving flora, fauna, and in the Dead Sea, you would find absolutely no living organism, right? And why is that? That if the source is the same, why does two lakes act so differently? I'm sure you would know the answer. Let me see if I could see some of you giving me the answers. Why, if you have the same source of water, why would two of the lakes respond differently? Sea of Galilee having, the real great thriving flora and fauna, and the Dead Sea is totally dead with absolutely no. Okay, maybe two different ends. Okay. Right. So here is what it is all about. As Lata, you said, depends on land chemicals. Okay, here's what. Thank you. I guess virtual chocolates for everyone for all the responses. Thank you so much. So one is the beach, one is the sea. Okay, here is the interesting part out here. So as someone said, I would just mix in a little bit of Hindi as well. So the best part out here is both of them have the same source. But Sea of Galilee is a flowing one, is a flowing river. And we thank you, Ashish, for this virtual chocolate. And the Dead Sea holds on. It's not a flowing one. It holds on. The moment you hold on to something, it gets kind of stagnated. And there's a lot of sea the salt content that comes in. Because of the high salinity, there's absolutely no living organism in the sea, in the Dead Sea, as the name says. And in the Sea of Galilee, there is a lot of flow. And because of the flow, there is a constant growth. There's a flora and fauna, which is the best, and they're thriving all in. So what I wanted to say here is, like most of us, we kind of, over the period of time, as we are in the space that we operate, we kind of get closed and fixed with many thoughts. Though we would all love to say, the moment somebody asks you a question, do you operate from a fixed mindset or a growth mindset? We all put up our hands and say, oh yes, I do operate from growth mindset. But here is something very interesting, is that we love to know that we operate from growth mindset, but most of the time we are quite fixated with what we have gathered over the period of time, with the kind of experiences that we have gathered over the period of time. Fortunately, to many of us, the pandemic has shown a total new space where you need to know about resilience, where you need to know about growth. So we had Pankuri talking about marketing growth and marketing. Here is something we are talking about, thoughts and growth, because it starts all over here. As they rightly say, everything in your life happens twice. Once in the workshop of your mind and once in real. So how do we how do we create that space for everyone around us? And with that, I would like to say is that a growth mindset is something that we need to foster on. And what is a growth mindset? How do we get that? Where do we get it from? Most of us, we tend to be occupied with something called as an SLB. And when I say an SLB, it's a self-limiting belief. And when we operate out from the space of a self-limiting belief, we are more fixed with certain spaces. Now, when there was a survey done as to what could be the top 6 challenges across the globe, you would be astonished to know that these are aspects which is to do a lot much with the way we relate to people. It could be honing effectiveness. When I would say honing effectiveness, looking at the entire productivity around us, the way we inspire ourselves and others, the way we develop employees, the way we lead a team, guide change, and manage stakeholders. So if you see the entire 6 challenges that's put here, it's all in all basically the way you deal with relationships around, right? And so when you're talking about building that culture, the drive, the performing, the pride, it's important to understand how do we go ahead with that. So leadership actually begins with the right mindset. It's like if you are someone who is motivated, when you actually talk about being committed to something, that's when you move from being motivated to being passionate. So we always say it's a continuous journey, and you move from being not only just motivated, but being passionate. And I'll give you a perfect example of being passionate, where all can it lead you to. From just being a contributor, we all are contributors, we are individual contributors. We want to be team players, we want to be team leaders, we want to take the team along with us. It's like, how do I be accountable for everything? How do I take the ownership and the responsibility? It's a transition from here to there, because that's going to be what's creating the right kind of a growth mindset. So it's not just being good, but it's being best. How do I constantly work on being the best? And it's just not that I am working on my present, but I'm ensuring that whatever I'm doing in my present is also to make a lot of impact on my future. So while you're having a mindset that is really making you grow better and making that better space for yourself, a more empowered you, it's also important to know that as an authentic leader, the very first thing that you should know about you is about you, right? Knowing you, that's a self-awareness, where you're really looking at how aware are you about yourself, how are the way that you get into relationships. Because here is what, as MSMEs or as entrepreneurs, we always talk about relationships making a real great impact. And this is when you're talking about having sincere, genuine relationships. the values that each one of us hold, the kind of activities that we do to ensure that whatever we are doing is a contribution to the greater space. It's something larger than life. It's a bigger purpose of life that I'm really looking at. And that's where the vision is all about. So when you're looking at having a authentic leader's mindset, these are some of the elements that you really, really need to. So coming here, I just wanted to share this beautiful story with most of you, but would be knowing about it. But just let me reiterate, because this is so important for all of us. Here is, you would have known about this Choluteca Bridge. And this comes from, in a place called Honduras in Central America. And here is the story, is like in 1998, they built this Choluteca Bridge, okay? And they built it in a place where there was a lot of thunderstorms, whirlwinds, and anything and everything. There used to be a lot of damage across all the properties and all across the places. And they built this as an engineering marvel so that it could withstand any kind of hurricane or any kind of sandstorm or any kind of storm that comes in, floods or storms. And it was during the same year in 1999, Hurricane Mitch kind of attacked it. So when there was the Hurricane Mitch that came in, the entire space kind of changed. There was a lot of damage to property. Around 7,000 people died and a lot property moved in. The best part of it is nothing ever happened to this particular bridge, this Choluteca Bridge. However, the most funniest thing was the river, which was flowing right below this 485-meter bridge, suddenly changed its course. So the bridge, which was considered to be a marvel of engineering in itself, suddenly was a bridge to nowhere, because there was no water flowing, no river flowing below it. The river had changed its entire course. It started moving from another direction. The very good lesson that comes out from here is that it's more important today, not just to be built to last, but more important here, am I built to adapt? Right? So adaptability is something very, very critical. Adaptability is something that we look into everything. That's very, very important. Adaptability, agility is something that we've seen during the pandemic, post-pandemic, all that will come is more about it. Agility is something that we all say we need to have in constant space, where we need to see if the culture is of being agile people out here, we have an agile organization as well. Right? So coming from that space of adaptability and agility, we need to know that there are 4 critical spaces where we can influence others. One is the way you have your team formation, the team that you build in, the way you promote your team. When I say promote, it's more to do with how you promote yourself and the team, giving the due kind of presence. Many a time we feel, very difficult to promote ourselves, or rather, as Pankuri rightly says, be shameless and ask. Be shameless and promote, because that's the only way you can really, really strike that space of being visible. Even when I do a lot of, coachings with many women around there, one thing most of us lack, I call it as a pie chart, PIE. So it's like performance, image, and exposure. It's like performance, image, and exposure. That's PIE. And when I typically ask everyone, they would say that every one of us give a lot of importance to the P factor. That's performance. We kind of put in around 70 to 80% of that. But here is what it's important. Yes, performance is important, but equally or more important is your I and your E. That's your image and your exposure. So the way you promote yourself is like 70%. So 30% is your performance, the way you promote yourself, the image that you create, the exposure that you have is another 70 massive percent. So similarly, doing that with the team, it's very, very important. And how you get to do with the team, because trust is the core of every relationship that we have. And how do we create that trust is very, very critical, especially when it comes to relationships. And finally, networking. Again, I find a lot of us failing to do networking. And trust me, networking is something that it's like today's contacts are your tomorrow's contracts. It's like your net worth is your network, right? Your network is your net worth. So if you have your today's contacts and if you are leveraging them, obviously they become your contracts tomorrow. So these are 4 elements that you really can work on to influence. So many a time when I work with teams or with organizations, small, medium organizations with 100 to 150 to 200 team members, one thing that we find it very, very, very difficult to crack up is that the mentality with which most of us operate from. As founders or as founders, we see that there is very little of communication that we are passing on through down the line. We kind of feel that our first liners are good enough. We pass on the information to them, but we find it difficult to pass it on to the next level, We find there's a lack of focus. Then there are some people, obviously, we find having toxic ones who are negators, who keep on negating, who kind of creates that small little fire in there. Then we find someone who is very aggressive. And all this leads up to saying that we are weak with the way we lead. So what is that you can do critically so that there can be a team which can be something like a high performing team? First and foremost, as I said, we go back a little earlier, we develop the leader's mindset and having the authentic leader's mindset, because relationships mean a lot. I very recently came across a very cute couple who is running a pharma company, and they have 200 members, 50 people in the office work and 150 in the factory. So the 150 is taken care of by the husband, and the 50 is taken care by the wife in the office in Mumbai. Now the 150 workers has a boss, that's the man. He's a task-oriented leader, and the 50 in the office is taken care by the relationship-oriented leader, that's the wife or the lady out there. Now, there's a constant tiff. The lady always feels there is no enough relationship with the factory workers, and the man feels that you're too much relationship-oriented. There's a constant conflict. Here is what I would love to say, there's something called as a balance that we say, and we've always observed that as relationships, they go a real long way to sustain, to having those kinds of team members who are highly passionate and who are aligned with you on the goals. So developing that leader's mindset, being on to them, understanding them a little more, having those regular one-on-one, setting up your team to be accountable for the results, creating the culture of feedback, because we always feel, we can give the feedback, but whilst we have to take the feedback, it becomes like a quite tough task. If I have to ask my children how good a mom I am, it's difficult. But if I have to give the feedback to my kids, it becomes much easier. It so is the case when we replicate the same at the workspace too. Change management, again, going through so much of massive changes, especially because we are in a VUCA world, which is highly volatile, it's highly unpredictable, it's ambiguous, it's complex, it's uncertain. So what would you do when there's so much that is around you is moving continuously, so dynamic that you yourself are not able to? How do we create that space for ourselves that we are able to maintain that change space to ourselves and to others? It's like the ability or being agile, how quick, adaptable, or how resilient we are, and how we can manage our time and our energy. Because energy management is everything about energy management. So the way you manage your energy kind of impacts the entire day. So that's why we say, if you're really looking at creating a culture of high performing groups, or having a high performance culture, some very crucial things that you should focus on is, first and foremost, have your group, your team, to have shared purpose and values, having the element of trust, transparency, and openness. Absolutely. Where the focus goes, energy flows and results show. That's so true, Anchit. It's important to have the communicator and also the constructive debate. It's important to realize that there's an ownership and accountability that we all need to be mindful about. Having that contribution, that recognition that's going to be given to the others, appraised time to time. And of course, sorry, inspect what you expect, measure what you expect. So the monitoring is important, but at the same time, it's not about micromanagement, but it's being flexible and also able to make that right kind of a mark. And that's why I always say, trust. What is trust? We all fail to know what is trust. And trust is a very beautiful element. It's a beautiful equation out here. And this is something that I would love to leave you all with, because we keep thinking, what is this trust all about? How do I really create that trust? But trust is nothing but a small little equation where I say T is equal to C plus R plus I upon SI, or self-orientation. And here's what you need to remember is that, excuse me, here is that what you have to remember is that when you're working on your trust, ensure that you are someone who's credible, who is all the time doing what he or she says, someone who is reliable, who can honor your commitments. Someone, when you say intimacy, it's all about how are you there for your team member when they need you? Are you able to keep their confidential information confidential? And these are some of the things. If you are competent, capable, and you're reliable, and also someone who is able to support your team member at the right space, there's something called as that you create that bond of trust with your team members. And the next on the denominator is self-orientation. Very important element. Never ever, if you're in it for yourself, the people don't trust you. But if you're in it for them, they will definitely trust you. So keep your self-interest low and keep your credibility, reliability, and intimacy quotient higher. So I wanted to give this a classic example. Yeah, that's a trust building for success. Absolutely. Yeah. So we all know about Fireworks, very recent example. I'm sorry, my throat is just a little bad. So Freshworks is a very classic example. We have this, we know it's a unicorn 1 billion project that we just got listed on the NASDAQ. They have a very beautiful concept that goes on while they are hiring their their team members. Now, this is something very exciting that I found with many of the enterprises, is that if I am somebody who has a certain kind of personality, I connect certainly with people like me. Birds of a feather flock together. So what happens when I'm forming my team? I have the typical habit of creating more people like me. What I fail to remember is that an organization or an enterprise is not just made up of Siji. It's made up of Siji and Anchal, Pankuri, Vishal, everyone around it. And we have different personalities. And so when we need to create that space where we can bring in people of different spaces. And it's very important. And so when in Freshworks, they really attributed the success of Freshworks to the kind of team and the people that they have there. And the first thing that they say is that more than the qualification of a person, what they look at is how passionate is the person to do that particular space or the job. And if you're passionate, and even if you don't have the qualification, are you ready to sweat it out for that? They would say, come and join us. Because that's where they say it's called as the craftspersonship, where it's all the craft is depending on the way, how much passionate you're about that particular aspect. Second way was that creating that happy work environment around them. And they believe also in how they can take small risks, they can work through urgency, they can speak up, and that is agility through empowerment. And last but not the least, one thing which led to the birth of Freshworks was the way Girish, the founder, had a space where he was not treated well as a customer. And they really felt that the most important thing here is to be a true friend of the customer, not as a vendor, not as a partner, but be as a true friend of the. I love this word because the moment he said, my customer is not a vendor, my customer is not a partner, and it's a friend. The way we have the space that we create, we kind of talk to that, we kind of perceive that even according to that same space. So the moment you say true friend, we really create that space, that perspective of treating them like that. And so chat is something that they work on to leading with drive, the pride, and the excellence, the performance culture created up because of this chat. That's the acronym they use to create the culture, which is a highly performing one. Thank you, and that's from my side.
That is amazing, Siji. I think we want to learn more and more from you. I can see those messages in the chat box. So I think we're done with an amazing presentation. So let's all come back on the screen. Siji, would love to see you on full screen. And yes, everyone, what are your leadership questions? Siji is here with us for the next 5 minutes. We have this amazing opportunity to ask her some questions. So what are your questions? Come on, let us know your questions in the chat box. I will pick up a few questions and I will be asking them on behalf of you to the very wonderful Siji Varghese. So Siji, my first question is from my side. Okay, my question to you is that as women leaders, sometimes what happens is that if not the people around us, there is a certain amount of restriction that is there in our head, right? That we are women, we are leaders, but we are women. So we are holding ourselves back, or we are not, going and playing full out. So what are those key strategies, those 3 key strategies that you would like to share with all the women in the room who are holding themselves back, who are restricting themselves as leaders?
That's a very beautiful question, Anjal. I have been there, done that. It's like 24 years. And the last 10 years, what I could see is that every time we want to do an investment in the business, the first thing that comes in my mind is like, will I get the permission out there? What if I fail? Would I be accepted back without being nagged for the rest of my life? So as a woman, most of the time, we have that habit of not being able to take those big risks. And we feel taking a big risk could be very dangerous because it could kind of take us to a different zone totally. But I feel the first and foremost important thing is that most of us, because of the conditioning of the society, we think in a particular way. What I'm seeing nowadays is that is changing because the centennial women, the millennial women, most of us, we are able to take it differently. So the first and foremost is having a lot of belief and confidence in the way you are there. I mean, you have your ideas. Second, I always love the fact that as women, we are able to multitask and we are also amazingly empathetic and have great relationships because we are born to have those. And I feel we could leverage on that skill set of being as a nurturer, as being empathetic. And that really helps us to move. And the third thing is that don't ever forget yourself. Keep remembering that you need to give yourself the space and the belief and the love. That's so critical because once you get into the grind, you typically tend to forget everything and you become so busy with everything. Ensure that you give enough time for yourself to revive.
I love that. I think what you're referring to here is that women leaders, it's okay to still connect to your feminine side as leaders, right? So we need not forget that, and we can still use those elements which the other gender does not have, and we can still start making a mark. Now, there's a question in the chat from Snehal, and she's asking that as a woman leader in the manufacturing sector who is just starting out and managing blue-collar workers, male and female both, what mindset or attributes do I need to have? So if you could just share something on that.
It's a very brilliant question, and as I said very recently, I was in a space where I remember one thing that task oriented and relationship orientation. Both is important. I feel what works the best, whether it's a blue or a white collar, at the end of the day, we are human beings. What works the best is the way we connect, we relate, we understand what could be the goals, because every one of us have certain goals in life. So it's important to align the organizational goals, maybe with the blue worker, with the white worker. It's like bringing the sense of belongingness. Are we able to empathize on how they are going, what they're going through, what they feel, what are their needs, and how could you connect with that? Because the moment you connect with that, trust me, everything is sorted. There's an amazing sense of belongingness, especially when it comes from the blue collared people, and they stay loyal to you. So if you are able to be on their side, be with them to know what perspective they deal with every day, trust me, they're more better than the white collared ones to deal with. So you don't have to be yourself, be authentic, just connect with them at their map of the world. And I think that's not it.
I think connection is the key, is what you're referring to. So Siji, I think these are some brilliant responses to all the questions that were there in the chat.